For 3,000 years, the Odyssey has been the ultimate adventure story, the original blueprint for the hero's journey, stretching in an unbroken line from the fall of Troy to a triumphant homecoming. The traditional classroom reading reinforces this. Odysseus is a mythic, invincible warrior, fighting monsters and dodging the winds of gods to reach a wife who waits quietly by her loom for 20 years. But this standard interpretation often turns a living story into a dusty artifact. It makes the stakes feel entirely foreign to modern human experiences, distancing us from the very real emotions of loss and long-term isolation. Reading the epic purely as a static historical record traps it in the past. If we only see the myth, we miss the human beings underneath, and the story loses its ability to speak to modern stakes. When Christopher Nolan announced a massive IMAX adaptation for 2026, the world expected a colossal, CGI-heavy blockbuster filled with magical spectacle. Instead, the film dropped audiences into a grueling, 3-hour psychological thriller. It was a sensory assault that chose disorientation over easy action. Nolan translated the core meaning of the story into the specific language of cinema, choosing to rebuild Homer's concepts from the ground up for a 21st century medium. How do you preserve the soul of a 3,000-year-old myth while stripping away the very magic that originally defined it? The translation begins with the structure. The film abandons the linear, chronological storytelling of the original poem. The editing fractures the narrative into jagged pieces, jumping between the trauma of the Trojan War and the brutal present-day voyage. These timeline segments rearrange into a cyclical maze, mirroring his mental state, replacing physical wandering with a psychological wandering through memories he cannot escape. Ludwig Göransson's musical score adds a physical layer to this confusion, utilizing low-frequency vibrations to induce genuine anxiety in the theater seats. This combination of shattered time and intense sound forces the audience to feel just as lost and tested as the hero on the screen. These repetitive loops of memory trap audiences in a perpetual now, mimicking a mind under duress, unable to separate past from present. The result is a functional simulation of the disorienting reality of post-war trauma. The translation of the divine follows a similar grounded path, specifically in the portrayal of the goddess Athena, played by Zendaya. Nolan removes the classical image of a magical entity floating down from the clouds to solve a hero's problems. In this film, Athena appears only as a shifting shadow in a room, a voice of strategic clarity emerging during moments of extreme crisis. The literal magic of the ancient world is translated into the internal, psychological intuition of a modern survivor. The heroes themselves are redefined, starting with Matt Damon's Odysseus, who is stripped of his mythic warrior invincibility. He is portrayed instead as a battle-weary veteran, a middle-aged man struggling with survival guilt and the weight of his own history. At home, Penelope is an active, calculating defender of her estate, using strategic patience as a weapon against those invading her palace. The cinematic framing turns her domestic space into a psychological war zone, emphasizing her constant struggle to outwit the suitors. Grounding these symbols in psychological realism makes ancient trauma immediately recognizable to today's audiences. The journey eventually reaches its emotional climax, the long-awaited reunion and the ultimate achievement of reaching home. But the film leaves us with a difficult question. After surviving devastating warfare and a decade at sea, can a person ever truly fit back into a quiet, normal life? This resolution underscores the broader purpose of adaptation. A film's goal is to do more than produce a passive, word-for-word copy of its source. Classical texts survive for thousands of years because they are living entities, constantly reshaped to reflect the anxieties of each new generation. Literature and cinema are two interconnected voices in one long, beautiful conversation across human history.